y'all, welcome back to the Desk Corner. Welcome to a new video. I thought I would pop in here and be part of the intro because I haven't done that in a while now and I haven't been on camera for a while, it feels like. But anyways, in today's video I thought I would answer some questions I frequently get. My channel is most popular right now for my beginners graphite series and some other beginners series that I've done, but mostly my graphite videos have done really well. And so I get a lot of questions about different materials, I guess, that I use and why I use them, so I thought it would be a good idea for me to just make a video addressing all that stuff and talking about what I use in my graphite and charcoal drawings and why I use them. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the video. Let's start by talking about paper because I actually get the most questions probably about paper, and this is going to pertain mostly to graphite and charcoal work. But I do want to explain which papers I like using and which ones I don't and why. So to start with, I have this Strathmore drawing paper. This is an old pad of paper. I don't really use it very much, and I just want to show you guys kind of why. I do have a sketch here that I actually never... Oh, that's kind of annoying. I should have gone through and finished that. That would have been a good piece. That's from a really long time ago. But anyways, I want to show you guys how this paper is actually pretty thin. This is just the normal Strathmore drawing paper, and it's pretty thin, and you can tell just kind of by bending it like this. And if I were to go in and shade this portrait with graphite and charcoal, I might get some marks on the back of this paper here, and this paper just looks like it would warp a lot more easily. See how you can even see the indent from just me going like this? I tend to avoid thinner paper like this because I don't want to have to worry about paper ripping or warping or I guess crinkling or having stuff come through on the other side here. You can see down here it says this is 80 pound. It's actually a really lightweight paper, and for something like sketching it would be okay, but I don't prefer to use light or thin paper, and I'm going to show you exactly why. I actually have an example, so let me move some of this out of the way. And here's my Strathmore sketch pad. This is even thinner. It's about 60 pound, and I'm going to open it up and show you guys. This is an old sketchbook. Here's some graphite sketches I did back in like 2017, and I actually did a lot of little sketches in here, but you can see that the paper is kind of like crinkled and messed up, and a lot of transfer is happening because this is actually a pretty thin paper. And this just happens because I'm doing multiple layers and I'm doing things like blending. And sometimes powder will just transfer regardless, but you can really see on the back how it shows through, and it's just not super ideal. Here's something I did with fine liner, and you can see that on the back it bleeds through a bit. I don't know if you guys can see it, but you can also see the ends are just kind of bent because when you have a thinner paper it tends to just sort of like warp and be damaged pretty easily. That's why I try to avoid thinner paper. Also, you kind of max out on layers after a certain point. So let me explain to you which papers I actually prefer over thinner papers like this. Probably my favorite paper to use with graphite and charcoal is this 400 series Strathmore mixed media paper. I haven't tried 500 series, if they even have that one, but anyways, I really love this paper. I even use it for colored pencil and stuff too, and I just want to show you the difference here. This is 184 pounds, so 300 GSM, and let me show you. So this paper, as you can see, when you lift it up, it doesn't warp or bend as much, and you're not going to get as much damage going on here. And I'll show you an example with the piece that I'm working on right now, which is my Rosa Parks drawing. So with this drawing, I've already done a ton of layers and blending, and there's some areas that are really dark here, so let me show you how this paper looks. It hasn't warped or bent due to me putting a lot of pressure with my pencil, and on the back, you can see that it's not like bleeding through or shadowing or whatever you call it when that happens. It's not warping due to the pencil strokes or anything, or the pencil marks. And that is why I like to choose a thicker paper like this for drawing, especially if I'm not just doing a sketch and I'm actually going to be shading and putting pressure and a lot of layers. You want to make sure that your paper is going to hold up through that. So that's why I like to use a thicker paper like this. And you can kind of just tell by the noise it makes when you move the paper around, like this noise, that a paper is thicker and will be able to handle more. this is something I kind of had to learn over time because I started out with like really thin sketch paper. I didn't start out with thicker paper, so I didn't really know the difference for a while when I first started out. So I hope this is helpful for some of you that are starting out and you don't really know the differences between papers when drawing. So this is my favorite paper. It's mixed media. It has a little bit of a tooth to it, which means it's not completely smooth on the surface. I get a lot of questions about Strathmore Bristol Smooth and Bristol Vellum, and I would just like to say that Bristol Smooth, for me at least, is not my best choice for like portraits or animals or things where I'm going to be adding a lot of shading. And the reason is because this paper has kind of just like a very soft and slippery surface, and this would be really good for maybe like marker work and things like that because it's a nice smooth surface, but it doesn't really have enough tooth to grip a lot of pencil or charcoal. And so what will happen is you can max out on layers, and after you put a certain amount of layers down with your graphite or charcoal, you won't really be able to put more on top. Some people might be able to do realistic work on paper like this and be totally fine with it, but for me, I've tried it before and I often get a lot more dust coming off due to the paper not holding it as much, or the tooth not, I guess not having enough tooth to hold charcoal powder and things like that. So I tend to not use this paper as much for realistic work, and if I do, it's really apparent when I'm working on it that I can't get as many layers as I would like. Now, I did have somebody comment once and ask a question about if I'd recommend this over vellum, but it turns out that the type of artwork they were doing would be something more along the lines of this, or architecture, where you're doing a lot of line work and using a lot of H pencils, and in that case, I think the smooth surface could be okay for you because you're not doing as much shading, and line work that you want to be really precise might look nicer on a smoother surfaced paper. So it really does depend what you're working on, but if you're doing like realistic portraits or animals or things like that, then I think you'd be better off with a less smooth surface paper. I can't say that I recommend the Strathmore Bristol Vellum, the yellow one at least, because I don't really like the texture that it has, but I can recommend the 500 series Bristol Vellum. This one is more expensive. It is 100% cotton though, it's more archival I guess, and it has just a better texture to it. And I've reviewed this in a video before, like a really recent video that you might have already seen. But this is a nice thick vellum paper that I recommend that you could use over the yellow one, which is the 300 series. So basically these are my two favorite to use now. This is fairly new, so I can't really say too much about it. I still have to try it out with different media and stuff like that. But yeah, I love to use this one, which is a little bit easier to find and more affordable for my graphite and charcoal, as well as a lot of my colored pencil work. So I know everybody has their own preferences, but I do tend to get a lot of questions. I hope that this helps some people out and that you try some different papers and find what suits you. Another question I get is which graphite pencils I've tried and like best, and I actually have two review videos out, one for the Faber Castell 9000 and one for the Staedtler Mars Lumograph, which I recently bought. These are the two graphite sets that I use and that I like. So I haven't used any graphite pencils in the past that I really liked. These are the two that I like. However, I haven't tried all the brands, of course, and there's a lot I want to try in the future. I just don't want to buy a million graphite pencils right now when I don't need them. If you want to actually see an in-depth review, I'll link the reviews down below for each of these. It is worth noting though that the Faber Castell tends to be harder, like the core is a little bit harder, and the Staedtler has a little bit of a softer core, so the Faber Castell might feel a little harder when you're using them. You can still blend them really well though. The Staedtler feel a bit softer. That's just what I've noticed if you're looking for the difference between the two. I get questions about which grade of pencil to use. So for example, here's an H pencil. And if you play around with your pencils, you'll notice that the H pencils and the H range pencils in general are really light and hard, and you can get really fine lines with them, but you can't really do a great job with shading because, I'll show you, you won't be able to build up a ton with just the H pencil, and you get a lot of lines and it's going to be a little bit harder and not as soft compared to like a 2B, which I'll show you here. This is a 2B pencil. You can already see how much darker and softer you can get, and here's an 8B for a comparison here. So it's H, 2B, and then this one is an 8B pencil. And you can see how much softer that looks, and you don't see the lines as much here. You don't really see any lines at all. and there's a few lines you can see here, like pencil stroke lines, and then with the H there's a lot of lines that are apparent. So you can see why people like to use the H range for line work, and the B range, of course, for shading. So if you're new, I would just play around with your pencils and get to know them a bit. As far as charcoal goes, I used to use the General's charcoal a lot, and let me show you. See how dark that gets and see how much powder it gives off? So that was medium, or no, that was soft, and now I'm going to show you medium. So these were the charcoal pencils I used to use with my graphite pencils a lot, and recently I haven't been using those as much because I've been using these other pencils that I've actually talked about a ton in my videos, so you might have already seen me talk about them, but they're the Cretacolor oil-based charcoal. I cannot stop talking about them because I love them. So that was the extra soft, and then I'll show you the hard. Basically, you could see the difference. They're not quite as dark. They're still pretty dark. They don't give off all of that powder that the Generals do, and I don't always like to work with a lot of moving powder and messy charcoal, so I'm having a fun time using these ones in my work. I've been using the oil-based charcoal with graphite in my Rosa Parks drawing, and I'm still able to get a lot of really dark areas, and it's not quite as messy. So that's why I've kind of switched to using that, but I used to use the General's charcoal, and if that's what you can find, it's a really good pencil. Just keep in mind that it's going to be really messy. I'll link these products down below, of course, but that's what I like to use. I sometimes use carbon pencils as well. I'd like to go into that in another video. I don't want this one to be too long talking about pencils, but my favorite carbon pencils are these ones. They're the Royal Sovereign Wolff's Carbon. I'll just do one swatch to compare. You pretty much get the same amount of dark value as you get with the General's charcoal, and it's a little bit messy, but not quite as messy or annoying squeaky sounding. So yeah, I'll talk about that in another video, you guys. I've gotten a question about using toned gray paper, which is something I'd like to try. I actually have toned tan, but not toned gray, and I think toned gray would be great if you have a charcoal pencil like this one, and then I also have a General's white charcoal pencil, and I think that if you use those two together on a toned gray paper, it would be really nice because you would get highlights. The toned gray provides that mid-tone, and then you would be able to do your shadows. So I'm sure you could use it with graphite too, but I think you could really get an interesting result with charcoal on toned gray, and I'd like to try that out sometime. I'm definitely going to buy some eventually, but right now I cannot really justify more paper considering the amount that I have at this point in time. I also get asked if I like to use blending stumps, and to be honest, I don't use them too much anymore. I used to use them a lot, but the reason I don't use them too much anymore, and you can see that this allows you to blend out the graphite, but the reason I don't use them too more is I feel that they get worn pretty easily, and then you get stuck with a lot of graphite on them when you try to use them. This could be useful for filling in areas, but you sometimes get a streaky result with this. So if I'm going to blend, I often just use like a Q-tip or something like that. But this is a pretty good way to blend like smaller areas that are a little more detailed versus maybe a large area. It's a little harder because you can get more streaks. I always mention this in every video, but I use kneaded erasers a lot because you can pick up a little bit and not pick up everything. So if I use a kneaded eraser here, you can see I am able to lighten up this 8B a lot, and you can pull out highlights that way. Versus this eraser, which I like to use for like hardcore erasing, but the problem with it, I'm just getting some of the dirt off of it, or the residue. The problem with it is it's hard to just pick up a highlight because you end up taking up way more graphite or charcoal than you want to. So this is more subtle, and then this is what I like to use to really erase something that went wrong. And then of course, as I always mention, I have my detail eraser, the Tombow Mono Zero, which is really, really nice because you can just go in and create kind of fine lines with your eraser. It just allows you to fix really minor things. So I definitely recommend something like this. If you don't have that, you can just use the edge or use like a razor to cut off the edge, but I think it's kind of wasteful to do that with a white eraser anyway, and it doesn't really maintain a point for very long. These are kind of like a mechanical pencil, by the way. They're refillable once you run out of eraser, just so you guys know, but I really like to use that. As far as sharpeners go, I often use this red General's sharpener because it's easy on charcoal and things like that, so it doesn't break. But it's kind of hard to use a manual sharpener like this because it's really small and it can give you hand cramps. But with graphite, I tend to not sharpen my pencils too much. They tend to maintain their point, especially my Faber Castell 9000s. So I don't actually have to use this too much, but I definitely think an electric sharpener is better if you, if your hand cramps up a lot, because this is actually probably not good to use because of your hands. I'm currently looking for a better sharpener. This one is not very good, and this one doesn't fit very well with these hexagonal, I guess, pencils like this that are not a round barrel. So I'm still on the hunt for looking for something better. I've also been asked what's best to sketch, and I honestly, for the longest time, just used a normal 0.7 lead mechanical pencil to do my sketches. I didn't even really use my graphite pencils or anything like that. And recently I just got a fancier mechanical pencil for fun, and this is a 0.5 lead, but really I don't think it matters too much, and mechanical pencils are great for sketching because you can sketch in all those tiny details and you never have to sharpen your pencil. If you're interested in more charcoal videos, which I haven't done a lot of, I've done a lot of graphite videos, not a lot of charcoal. Let me know what your ideas are in the comments below. And I hope that this helps to answer some questions as to why I use the supplies I do right now, and maybe it can help some of you, and I really encourage everyone to try different things out and see what works for them. Alright, thank you so much for watching today's video as always, and of course I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!